Shizamune, hop on the beat!
Welcome back to another JoJo chapter review. This time we're taking a look at the 10th chapter of the JOJOLands The Hustle Part 1. It's a pretty busy time for JoJo this month. This chapter releases alongside the second volume of Part 9, as well as the third issue of the JoJo magazine, which features 2 new short stories and a new chapter of Cool Shock Old BT. I'll be covering those in other videos, but before the chapter itself, let's take a look at our new volume. First and foremost, the second volume has finally given us a name for the cats and their stand, which the group encountered a little while ago. The cats are known as Wild Cat Size, and their stand is Cat Size. This is based on a song by Suzy Quatro, one of the namesakes for Suzy Q. The description says, "These are mammals, vertebrates with stand abilities as Usagi predicted. They intertwine their fur and launch it where it becomes as hard as wire. Upon making contact, it entangles and constricts. These cats are a unique species native to the island of Hawaii and appear to be highly intelligent." The volume also gives us a new Araki author's note. Here he says, "While walking to work, I'll sometimes get stopped for police checks, but other times people will just hand me food. They'll be like, 'Would you like some persimmons to go? Perhaps some udon or radishes?' These people don't even live nearby. I don't know who some of them are. They don't expect autographs or anything, and it's a different person each time. I guess I look hungry. They even handed me matsutake mushrooms one time. Isn't that amazing? What I'm trying to say is, that's how I start off my work days." In the last chapter, Dragona and Usagi escape from the luxury watch store, while Jodio and Paco realize they are being attacked by a hidden enemy. We pick up right from the end of that chapter with the imposter stabbing Jodio in the neck. With this chapter being titled The Hustle, we get to see some more of how Paco's stand works in action. First, he uses his muscles to grab a tray from the table to block the enemy's blade. Paco describes the enemy's stand as floating multicolored sand, which he uses to disguise himself. Paco also calls the sand real, so we can gather that this is a bound stand, and non-stand users would also be able to be tricked by his illusions. We also get our first real look at the user himself, without any disguise on. Really, the whole vibe from this guy and his ability just screams rock human. Visually, the stand is quite similar to Part 8's Dr. Wu, and the ability to disguise is very fitting for a rock human, although we still can't say for sure. Paco starts to question who the enemy is, but he doesn't answer before they start fighting again. Paco's able to stop the blade by catching it with his arm muscles. Then he punches himself in the elbow, making the blade vibrate and causing the enemy's arm to start bulging out. After Paco grabs his neck, he makes an arm appear holding a knife over him with his stand. Paco points out that the image of the arm was fused with the clouds, screwing with his perception and making it impossible to tell how far away it was. We see that Jodio is actually okay, and a short flashback shows that Paco punched Jodio in the shoulder to vibrate his muscles and make the knife cut less deep. This chapter really did a lot to show off what the hustle can do. It was already a super versatile ability from what we saw before, but throwing the ability to affect the muscles of others into it is really interesting. Paco questions if the enemy is even human and says that his skin is like sand. We cut back to Usagi and Dragona leaving the store, drinking some wine they had stolen from Rohan's house. They say that the watch that was affected by the rock will be making its way to them shortly, and that the mechanism controlling the transfer of wealth moves things through people's feelings. We get a really funny moment here when these two are just completely oblivious to the fact that there's a fight going on and Paco has to tell them to shut up. Jodio mentions that while disguised as Paco, the enemy compared himself to someone in the Mafia. Paco doesn't buy this though, and thinks that his skills with a knife are too subpar for an assassin. Paco goes on to struggle on how to describe the enemy, which I think is even more strongly hinting at him not exactly being human. Next we see a couple heading out of the watch store, carrying the watch that'll eventually come to Dragona. The man here is named Leo, and he has a really unique appearance with glasses and a bowl cut that resembles Joshu. This seems to be Araki making a reference to the Japanese-French painter Leonard Suguharu Fujita, who is well known for his pictures of cats. We see some birds come by and pick up the watch, which Dragona believes is the mechanism carrying it to them. However, Jodio notices that the woman is still wearing the watch, and this is actually an illusion from the enemy. The enemy takes the brooch containing the lava rock and seriously wounds Dragona through the neck. Jodio uses November Rain around them and just barely manages to catch the foot of the enemy as he tries to escape. This shows us a pretty good example of how Jodio is able to control which rain is heavy, with the area on top of his allies just being normal rain. At the end of the chapter, Dragona calls Smooth operators to try and pull the wound outside to stop the bleeding. This was another really great chapter. We finally got our look at the first real antagonist in this part. He didn't talk much here, but we still ended up learning a lot about him. I'd say that most of the hints so far are pointing to this guy being a rock human, or maybe some other kind of non-human entity. I really loved the use of stands in this chapter as well. Paco in particular we got to see a ton of, with the uses of November Rain and Smooth operators also being really cool. Of course, the new stand is just crazy, and I really love the idea of it merging perfectly with the background and messed with perspective, like a much more clever use of Risotto's cloaking ability. With the upcoming fight being a 4v1, I'm interested in seeing how this guy's gonna try to fight all of them at once. We also have to see how Usagi will participate, since while he's had a few tricks before, so far he hasn't actually fought someone directly. Next chapter is also when I think we'll get a much better understanding of Smooth operators, since it seems like it'll be trying to physically remove the wound from Dragona's body. Finally, for this chapter, we also got our new author's note. Araki describes going on a trip to Osaka and Kyoto, where he found a book that uses onomatopoeia similar to what he uses in JoJo. This month, we also surprisingly got the release of the first volume of Part 9's official color scans. I was honestly shocked by this, since these scans hadn't exactly been fast for the previous parts. Most of the color palettes here are nothing new, since they're based on what Araki has drawn for them before. I don't have a problem with them, other than maybe Usagi, who pretty much just looks like Tingle from Zelda. I don't know why, but I always pictured Usagi's main color being red rather than green. It's no secret that in general, I'm not a fan of the color scans, and I've made a video going over my issues with how it's handled before. For this one, it has some good and some bad from previous parts, like the really ugly airbrush effect on top of the stands that I disliked from JOJOLian. But unfortunately, it also seems to have an entirely new problem. You may have noticed it by now, but the colors here are super oversaturated in a really unappealing way. At times it isn't that noticeable, but on some panels it just looks ridiculous, with the characters almost looking like they're glowing and having a yellow or orange tinge to their skin, as opposed to the more natural looking skin tones of previous part colorings. I almost thought it was a fan coloring the first time I saw it. I'm hoping this becomes less of an issue later, since while I don't quite like the color scans normally, their flaws for me usually aren't this apparent. That's about everything to talk about this time. This is a really busy month for JoJo, and I'm going to have a lot to cover in the coming days. You can definitely expect me to cover the newly released magazine and the Cool Shock Old BT chapter in their own videos coming very soon. If you want to stay updated, make sure you subscribe and click the bell. You can also join the Hum and Beat Discord to be updated when new videos release. Finally, I'd appreciate if you help support the channel on Patreon. There you'll receive Discord perks and the opportunity to submit questions. I usually answer questions at the end of my main videos. Before we end though, I'd like to let people know about a change Patreon has made to their community post system. Originally, I told people to leave their questions in the member post or community tab. However, they've now completely gotten rid of this, replacing it with a new chat system. Currently, the chat only works on the mobile app, but feel free to leave your questions there for me to use. Alternatively, I'd ask that you please DM your patron questions to me directly over Patreon. Unfortunately, when this change was made, all the old community posts were deleted, so if you had a question there that you still want answered, please ask it again so I can get to it. Thank you for watching. This is the part of the video where I thank my $5 and up patrons. Thank you to Alex Ramirez, Doorbell, Crayon, Rigovids, Zucato, Pumpkin Doge, Marrow, Almighty Quarth, Gatling Grove, Lime Jinjo, Sponge Cake, Cakext, Feliciano Rabaja, Rayana Meme, Christian McDonough, Navi, Emmanuel Etienne, Pulse Dog, Great Riek, Carmotrina, Hunter Gill, Adam Grogan, Zach Greenfield, FIFO, Rob Goliath, Jacob Smith, Professor Foosball, Ryan Ramirez, and Big T.